So there's a few email distribution lists that I'm on that I get people's like newsletter. I feel like that's so 1990s or early 2000s or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a couple long form, email blog posts basically that I get. And from people I really respect, there's one in particular that I get. It comes every Friday.
Let me guess.
Yes.
Scott Galloway.
Yes, Scott Galloway. We've referenced him several times on the podcast. NYU business professor.
And you reference him a lot.
Yeah.
At home. You really admire him.
He's got a lot of good economic information that I find interesting. But like his big theme is talking about the plight of young men and how in today's society, when women are so much more independent and autonomous, they don't need men anymore. We're seeing deaths of despair and addiction crisis among young men, and it's kind of catastrophic. And so I feel like there's some overlap between his work and our work, and so I just find him really interesting. But the point I'm trying to make is his email will come and it'll sit in my inbox for days and days and days because I know it's going to take me 15, 20 minutes to read, or 10 or 15 minutes, something like that. And I want to sit down and I want to give it undivided attention, and I just don't ever find a 10-minute window to give undivided attention to something without distractions. And so, you know what I figured out? His email, he has a voice actor read the damn thing, and he puts it out as part of his podcast. I just figured this out a few weeks ago. And I was like, well, why don't we do that? Because you know what? I wonder if we have intoxicated podcast listeners who don't even know that we also have a blog and we put out weekly content that's really, it's not just like rambling like we do here on the podcast. It's a little more, what I like to say is content dense, because you can take out all the fluff and just kind of stick to the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so a few weeks ago, I started doing what Scott Galloway, and I think a lot of people, I don't think this is breaking news, to take written word and read it and turn it into spoken word. I think audiobooks are not a new thing. So like that's a good example.
Audio blogs.
So
you call them vlogs when they're video. What do you call them when they're just spoken word blogs?
I don't know.
Blogs.
Audio writing? Blogs?
Blogs.
Blog sounds great. I know one person who loves when we change names that's going to hate that. But so if you, as an intoxicated podcast listener, if you just listen to our long form or hour-ish long episodes on a weekly basis, sometimes Sheri and I, sometimes we have guests, and you are interested, you can also, dedicate 10, 12, 15 minutes of your time, some other time during the week, and listen to a verbal version of our written word, and we hope that you do. And I think we've also confused some people, because I think some people come to download this format, the episodes that start with an episode number. Like, for instance, this one's episode 301, and they find this blog thing that, only takes 10 minutes or 12 minutes to listen to, and they're like, what was that? And where was Sheri? And why is Matt just clearly reading all the time?
It was only 10 minutes. I loved it.
Well, we know what you think about it. Yeah.
But
it is very, very condensed. Yeah. But so if you're just downloading that one now and you're not getting the long form one, I just want to clear it up. That's why I want to mention it, because I think by inserting this in there without any kind of real explanation, we might have created some confusion. Some people can't find the long form they want, and other people haven't yet found the shorter podcast episodes that are really our blog posts. So
yeah, and we're not doing it to be like irritating, because I do have podcasts that I listen to and I download, and there's like some short or introductory kind of to a series of blog posts. It's not because we're trying to be irritating.
Do you find that irritating?
I do sometimes find that irritating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we're definitely not trying to be irritating.
So it's certainly not meant to be an irritation.
Mondays are when the big podcast drops. the one with the episode number, and then Thursday is the day that we're publishing the verbal version of the writing for the week. So if you want to listen to both, I would love you forever, and I think that would be great, listener. But just want to clear up that one isn't replacing the other. Nothing's going away. This is addition, not subtraction.
Yeah.
And I just don't see our world getting to a point where listening becomes less popular and people go back to reading more. Maybe when we retire. Maybe that's what'll happen to us when we retire. But with life the way it is, like I said, I've got those newsletters that they go to my inbox to die. And if someone will read it to me, though, I'll listen to it while I'm mowing the lawn or on a run or whatever. Petting a cat, my favorite thing, So we hope you listen to both. Sheri, for most of our marriage, I thought of foreplay as the way I touch you before going for the promised land. How do I tempt or tickle or tease or just get your engine revved?
Tantillate.
Tantillate, what a good word. That's how I thought of foreplay for so long until the past few years. And, I don't think I'm alone. I don't watch porn. That's not a judgmental thing. I'm not bragging. I'm not trying to get bonus points from you, Sheri, my slightly, somewhat prudish wife. But I have a bit of what could be classified as a compulsivity issue. So I don't take the risk of, I just watch a little porn, because I don't do anything a little, and I'm afraid it would turn into a lot.
Yeah, even cabbage.
Even cabbage. Speaking of opportunities to listen to the written blog posts, if you scroll back through our catalog just a little bit and find my cabbage overdose episode, I hope that you'll listen to that. But so I can become addicted to anything. And since there's like literally millions of people in this country that are currently addicted to porn, I don't think porn is a place I should go. Again, if it's your thing, go and you just do it casually, occasionally, maybe you do it together as a couple. No judgment in that at all. My opinion about porn has changed a lot over the years. And, as long as it's filmed ethically and the actors know what they're doing and everybody in all parts of it feel good and ethical about it, then go get them, Tiger. But it's not for me. I think the way society in general depicts foreplay, but I think even more so in porn, the porn that I don't watch. I'm going to talk about the thing I don't know anything about now. I'm pretty sure erotic.
You caught glimpses of it occasionally.
Oh yeah, right?
So it's not like you're totally unfamiliar.
Yeah, I went to college and lived in a fraternity, so sure, it's not like I've never seen porn. It's just not my thing. Yeah. But so erotic touch is depicted as kind of the first step in foreplay. I think a lot, maybe almost all men think about foreplay as like stretching before you go for a long run, Like, what do I got to do here? What parts do I touch? How do I?
I wish you could see the image I have in my head right now.
Oh yeah? Can you describe it?
End of the bed, sweatband, stretching like in a 70s workout sweatsuit kind of thing.
And I can see you in bed.
Sort of like a Ron Burgundy-ish kind of man standing down there to get ready to launch.
And I can see you in bed asleep, and you're either when I rustle you saying I'm already asleep or I'm still asleep. Either way, why don't you take your headband and go for a run? I think a lot of people think of foreplay in that way as just something that's a prelude to the sexual encounter. But I now know that foreplay starts hours, days, weeks, months, even years before reaching that promised land. Esther Perel, one of my inspirations, one of my idols, she says that foreplay starts at the end of the last orgasm. So basically what she's saying is you're always in a state of foreplay. And I think she's right. I think if you do it right, foreplay is perpetual. Foreplay never ends. Now, it's really important what that looks like. And so, for instance, in our relationship, if I walk past you and you're working on something and I grab your butt or I grab your boob, that is not going to be classified positively in your mind as it relates to foreplay. Whereas if I walk past you and I just touch your shoulder, just made you know I'm there, my hand comes across your back, not your really low lower back, but your top back as I walk by,
Mm-hmm.
I have this impression. So here, live, unrehearsed, you can let our listeners know if my impression is right or wrong. I have this impression that that's endearing, that that's comforting, that that's a sign of safety. How do you feel about it if I come across, the top, the shoulder area of your back as I walk past?
Yeah, I think endearing is a good way to describe that. Non like physical touch that doesn't lead to sex. The word foreplay like makes the hair on my arm stand up,
Ooh, please go
and
on.
it makes me like get tense because for years, um, when we were having really bad sexual encounters and experiences, um, and I think towards the end you just gave up on the foreplay, which was good. But there would be this like boom chicka wow wow kind of going on where you like would try to have foreplay start when we were in the bed,
Yeah,
like before we were going to have any sort of sexual encounter.
yeah.
And it just made me so tense and aggravated and upset
Cringy?
and cringy. That's a good
Ooh, I
word.
love that word.
I know. So just the word foreplay, I hate it. I hate it. I think that
Well, I'm
it's
glad I've
because
used it for the last
I
15 minutes. That's got to be helpful.
yeah. I think that it's because there wasn't the emotional safety and there wasn't that sort of connection throughout the day or the week or the weekend. We could have had 2 days that were good, after an incident where maybe it didn't go over the top, blowing up with you drinking and an argument, anything like that. But we could have had like 2 days where we were getting along really well. We did something fun or we worked on a project together and it went well. But it's like as soon as we would get into bed, like there would be this awkward touching because we didn't do anything
Mm,
like physical touching and feeling comfortable. I mean, at least for me, it wasn't your hands on me didn't feel comfortable because when your hands were on me, there was the expectation of sex.
yeah. And
It ending
so
in a happy ending for you, like
So for that, like you said, like we've been working on a project for a couple days, running with that example, that whole period there might not have been any touching at all. And probably knowing me, if we were, trading information or you're telling me what to do next or I'm telling you what to do next, very curt, very matter of fact, very kind of directional, without a lot of you know, I don't know. Empathy's not the right word, but just not a lot of I, we. One of the things that was missing from our relationship at the end of my addiction and in the first part of sobriety was playfulness. So, like if we're working on, let's say we're building a piece of IKEA furniture. I don't know. That's just something people could maybe relate to.
mm-hmm.
It's like hand me that screw and hold this flashlight and do this thing.
Yeah,
Not like
I was treated like your assistant rather than, or if I were to start building it, there would be why are you doing this? It's
yeah.
not like you do this. I can
Or
build
why are you
things.
doing it that way?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the fact that there would be that tone of that, and it wouldn't be a partnership. I mean, heck, even like if we were building something and it was a complicated instructions, and I know that I have a friend who says that IKEA is Swedish for divorce because they had to refurnish some downstairs area temporary living for an adult child.
I like
that
that.
moved back in, but I mean, even just like a high five or we're doing it or, a
Yeah.
hug at the end of a project would have been something. We would have just moved on and there would have been no, hey, or we did this well. Or you would have gone like, we did this so great together. And then you would have been like, sex, 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 sex
Yeah.
in your brain.
Yeah.
Like, she's going to be this. We didn't argue at all during this project. She's going to be so happy about having sex. And then we got into bed, and then you're like, we're gonna have sex, and then foreplay, grab in all the wrong places. Because you and I didn't communicate about sex, so you didn't really know what I liked.
Yeah. Well,
as far as like foreplay.
Yeah. How to lead into those places, because those places eventually you like to be touched, but not just right out of the gates.
Right, and not at those times. Like, just I would have been like, just have the intercourse and be done.
Yeah. So this goes to the main theme of what we're talking about here: emotional safety and emotional intimacy, non-sexual physical touching. All of this is really helpful, and a satisfactory replacement for all of those things is not just okay, we survived the day, we didn't really interact, or we didn't interact in a nice, friendly, compassionate way, and let's get it on. Like, that doesn't work for you. So I want to talk about I want to make this broader than just our experience, and talk about the findings from a 12-month intimacy intervention trial study that we conducted with 13 couples. It ended in February. All of the relationships were committed monogamous partnerships, and these were all couples that were in recovery from alcoholism from one of the partners drinking. So this was not a situation where both of the partners were alcoholics. That's a thing. That's not something you and I have ever encountered or worked on or researched or anything. So in each of these 13 couples, you had one problematic drinker and one partner of that problematic drinker. And we did this 12-month study that involved surveys throughout, and we learned a ton. I want to talk about one of the things we learned. So much data from there were 5 surveys that each individual took by themselves. The couples didn't take the surveys together, at least they weren't supposed to. Looking at the data, it looks like there was a little of that maybe. But for the most part, the surveys were taken individually by the people. And so lots of places that we can go, and we will continue to talk about the data from this survey on the podcast and on the blog, in our writing as well. But I went to some qualitative data that we had about emotional intimacy responses, and I tried to lump the qualitative data into 2 buckets, one positive and one negative. When I say qualitative data, this is where people could just freehand write. I don't even think there was a character limit. Just tell us your experience with emotional intimacy in your relationship, something to that effect. And then I took those responses, sometimes it was a couple of words, sometimes it was paragraphs, and tried to categorize. And there's a really sophisticated way to do that I didn't do. I just made it really simple. Was this piece of feedback positive, or is this piece of feedback negative as it relates to emotional intimacy? And when you think about qualitative research, think Brene Brown. This is what she does, because she talks about storytelling in research. She doesn't just want numbers. And so that's very much what this was about. We gave our participants an opportunity to tell a story, and then we've got to take the stories and put them in buckets so that we can do a little bit of analysis. And so positive and negative is just keeping it super simple. And so, like, an example of a positive comment about emotional intimacy is, our emotional intimacy is strong and growing. That's something that one of the participants said. An example of a negative response about emotional intimacy would be something like this: our emotional intimacy is non-existent, and we have no idea how to get it on track. That's obviously very negative. There were some that were more subtle. There was a little bit of a challenge to differentiate. I probably could have had a third bucket that was kind of indifferent or in between or not sure. And so that there would be another way to parse the data. I didn't do that. I did find it to be reasonable to break things into a pretty clear positive and negative. But like, another example would be, we just can't figure this out. We can't get it on track. We're trying. It's getting a little better. That I would have still classified as negative, because it doesn't. If someone says it's getting so much better, positive. And so I want to give all this explanation, because if somebody wants to question the data or question the methods, I think you have every right to do so. I want you to understand what we're doing and what we're presenting here, and then make your own judgments.
Yeah. And so with having that, not having that third bucket, it kind of made it sounds like you're kind of being like me, being more of a pessimist. But if there was this indifference or uncertainty, we can't get it on track. We want to try, but we can't get there. That is going to go in that negative column.
Yeah, because I mean,
it's not a positive review. It's not like we have gotten it on track and we're going forward, or So I'm just trying to like make it a little bit different explanation of why the number that has been that you'll like read here is going to be a little higher
for the negative.
For the negatives.
Yeah, well, and one of the logics behind doing it that way is these people signed up for an intimacy intervention. These are people that want to improve intimacy in their relationship and recovery. So they've got a positive outlook in general on the thing. Mm-hmm. And so if their experience as they go through the 12-month process, and I took all 5 of the surveys, the pre-survey and then the 4 surveys at the end of each quarter, and I averaged the responses that people gave. And so if as they go through the process, it's just staying stagnant, that is, I'm going to make the assumption, a negative outcome for them because they're trying to get better. If we just surveyed people and there was no intervention, no work to be done, if we just surveyed people at certain times during the course of a year and it got a little bit better, you might consider that to be positive. But if they weren't making progress in leaps and bounds, then I think the participants found that to be negative because they were hoping to make progress in leaps and bounds. So yeah, thanks for that clarification. Because you're right, the numbers are big to the negative. 77% of respondents had negative comments about emotional intimacy. 23% had positive comments about emotional intimacy. And interestingly, 85% of the time, the couples agreed. So 13 couples, 26 people, all of them surveyed individually. 85% of the time, if the Sheri in the relationship said we're really struggling, then the Matt in the relationship also said we're really struggling.
They were both very much aware of what's going on in their relationship.
Yeah, there were only...
And they were feeling the same.
That's right. There were only 2 cases where one person in the couple said, yeah, it's going great. And the other person said, no, it's going terrible. And so I think that's pretty interesting information. So just wanted to share that as well. We asked couples, so that was the qualitative, the open-ended data that we started with, and we put people into buckets. Also asked in these surveys, we asked couples about sexual satisfaction, and we used what's called the global measure for sexual satisfaction, and it's a 7-point scale. People can say 1 if things are terrible or 7 if things are great. So the bigger number, the better, and obviously any number in between. People who reported negative emotional intimacy, they averaged a 3.4 out of 7 for sexual satisfaction. 3.4 out of 7. People who reported positive emotional intimacy averaged a 6.2 on this 7-point scale. 6.2 out of 7 for sexual satisfaction. So their sexual satisfaction numbers were 40% higher than people who were having a hard time with emotional intimacy. So I'm not far enough into data analysis to make a causal claim. Statistics and research, it's got all this formality to it, right? So it's not right for me to say emotional intimacy clearly causes higher sexual satisfaction in relationships. That's not okay for me to say. But I can definitely say that positive emotional intimacy in this sample, when people were positive about emotional intimacy, their sexual satisfaction was 40% higher. And that's just a fact. And that is a huge number. And that makes me disregard everything I thought I knew about foreplay, what we talked about at the beginning of this discussion, Sheri. Who cares about erotic touch? 40%, I mean, fuck off and get out of the way. 40%, I need to pour all my bad porn advice in all that effort about erotic touch into efforts about emotional intimacy. Do you agree? Aren't you okay?
Yeah.
Had a little.
Well,
It got you a little bit.
Yeah.
All this sex talk wound you up.
Wound me up. Yeah.
All right, so back to what we were talking about. So, emotional intimacy, people who had positive responses about emotional intimacy had 40% higher sexual satisfaction. Does that surprise you? Does that numbers, do those correlate with what you've heard from all the people that we've met and all the discussions we've had?
Not surprising at all.
Not surprising?
Not surprising at all. I mean, I think there's. I think it just goes along with like maturity and growth and what relationships represent. I mean, I feel like way back before alcoholism really even became a part of our life, your abusive drinking in the early days affected our sex life even then. Um, and I think it was okay for a little while that there wasn't an emotional sort of connection and we were just, I think, hormones and immaturity and that was okay. But then even in the middle 20s and late 20s age, I was looking for more of these types of connections that was emotional safety and I didn't realize it, rather than just, you know, getting into bed and wanting to have great sexual experiences. Like there needed to be more going on outside of the bedroom, more physical non-sexual touch,
Mm-hmm.
more connection. And I think that besides maturity and age and growth, there are hormones that play into this and how people evolve and change. So it wasn't surprising at all to me, um, to read these numbers.
Yeah. Kind of validated what you knew, but you didn't know you knew. That's how I
Right.
feel. Like, okay, we've got some tangible examples now to validate something that was happening, but I couldn't recognize it. I couldn't put a label on it. I couldn't put a finger on it.
Yeah.
But it's like a light bulb moment, right? Oh, okay, this is all coming together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I can hear like a loud echo of people in my shoes, men in midlife, that are like 40%. Great, I'm in. Now, what the hell is emotional intimacy?
Mm-hmm.
That sounds important. I'll do that. That's better than the porn advice. That's better than erotic touch. Great. Tell me how to do it. And I also want to make the point that I think because the majority of our audience is women and the majority of our audience is the partners of alcoholics, if you're listening and you're like, gosh, maybe I'm going to tune out for the rest of this episode because my life is in such turmoil and chaos and trauma that I'm nowhere near trying to have a sexually satisfying relationship. That's just not even on my radar. I want to encourage you to keep listening, and I want to explain that the reason that sex and intimacy is so often a topic for us is because you are very likely married to someone or in partnership with someone for whom sexual satisfaction is a big deal. And so look at this as you're learning about something that can be a motivator for positive change in your relationship, even if it's not something that you give a shit about right now.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that how you viewed it?
That's what I was getting ready to say. That's how I felt. Like we had lots of conversations throughout the years about the sex life. I mean, we have such a difference in our libidos. That's kind of plagued us, since having children, essentially. Um, so I think that I had this idea that we needed to have this emotional safety. I didn't know what it was before we can move forward, and that took a really long time. But I think that it was helpful to you to like be sober for long enough and do the work of recovery and healing for you to understand that it was okay that I was less eager to move forward with the sexual healing part of things. and there had to be a lot of consistency, and which also there had to be a lot of time before we could get comfortable really talking about this and really exploring it. And I also had to have a little bit more consistency and safety from you to kind of launch forward into exploring this part of the relationship that made me so uncomfortable and I had such resentments about for so long.
So do you now see it as, if you participate in not just conversations about this, but in an understanding and an effort around this, then it also gets you some of what you want, which is the stuff that leads into physical sexual intimacy, the emotional safety, the emotional intimacy, the non-sexual touch. Do you, do you see it as mutually beneficial, or do you just see it as, oh, this is important to my husband, so I'm going to make it important to me because I'm a good human?
No, I see it as mutually beneficial, and I see it as important for me, um, because there is that romantic relationship, and that is part of a romantic relationship, and it should be part of a romantic relationship, because there is a lot of chemistry behind those sexual experiences that are connection and the connection that happens with um, a good experience that carries throughout and is good for our bodies and our brains. And so I think that it is um, not just a mutually beneficial, because that makes it like, I don't want to make it seem like, because in the beginning, I think there was the beginning of our healing of this, there was a little bit like, okay, so I'm going to try to do this and move forward to try to help the relationship because things have gotten so much better without alcohol. And I see how much work Matt has done to grow and change. And I did my own work. So a little bit of it probably in the beginning was like, I'm doing this because this is something that he is really interested in, and I have respect for him again, and I'm going to do this because I want to make this part of the relationship better for him, because I could have probably just been okay without it
for the rest of your
for
life.
the rest of my life. And that was in the beginning before we really started to work on how we were taking care of me in the bedroom and that I was getting satisfaction out of it. So there was in the beginning a little bit like, okay, well, I'm going to do this for him because he and I have grown and done so much work together.
So still a little bit transactional, but maybe a nicer transaction.
Right. It wasn't like I wasn't holding resentment for it.
You weren't doing it just to shut me up and get me to go to sleep. You were doing it because you respected me a little bit.
Yeah, and I wanted to like explore this part of our relationship because we had kind of taken care of a lot of other issues, and this was one that had been plaguing us. So again, I had like more respect for you, and I had tolerance for you, and I had appreciation for you and what research that you've been doing. And I mean, there were definitely things that we tried that didn't necessarily work out well for us.
Yeah.
Or there were things that made me uncomfortable, and I, like a podcast or two, I'd be like, no, I'm not listening to any more of this podcast. It's making me too uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I think it was because it was the only thing. I wouldn't say it was the only thing left, but it was one of the big hurdles. And I had to get over my own insecurities, my own shame and embarrassment. And I also had to get over the resentment of the past.
Yeah.
And trust that you're going to be okay with me saying no or me correcting you and doing something that I'm interested in.
Something different.
Yeah. And just saying, okay, I don't want to have intercourse, but I want to have physical touch tonight.
And it's grown from, if I'm hearing you right, it's grown from being a better, more positive, more even loving transaction to being something that you actually desire, and you are glad that you haven't written off for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I'm glad I haven't written sex off for the rest of my life. Yeah.
Okay, great. So if you are listening to this and you're like, wow, I am so far away from what Sheri just said, everything feels toxic, I want nothing to do with sex, and um, I don't even, I can't even listen to the second half of this podcast episode if they're going to talk about sex the whole time. We're not. What we're going to talk about is emotional intimacy. And so I want to encourage you, listener, because we've been there and we know a ton of people who are there right now that are in that toxic area where sex is the furthest thing from what you want to think about. And as Sheri said, you could go the rest of your life without sex. That's how you feel. Then just focus on the tools that we're going to talk about around emotional intimacy, and let that be the entirety of your goal for now, and just see where that leads. And if you're on my side of the street, if you're someone who very much desires having a positive sexual relationship and being 40% higher on the sexual satisfaction scale in your relationship, then a few things that I want you to hear that I think are super important. One is, you just might be in a relationship with someone who literally could go the rest of her life without sex and be super happy about that. Especially if your partner has already had kids, there's hormonal changes that take place. And that was, you and I have a friend, I don't want to get off track, but you and I have a friend who had a really bad relationship experience way back in her mid late 20s. And I remember she said to me, I don't think I'll ever be with another man for the rest of my life. Like, that relationship was awful, and they had a kid. And so I think that's part of it. But she wrote off men for the rest of her life, and I thought, you are nuts. And here we are in our mid 50s, and still no relationship for her. So that's a real thing. And I think many, many, many men don't understand, because there is no switch that flips when we have kids. Nothing biologically tells us we've procreated and we've accomplished at least one of the goals of sexual contact. For women, there is a switch that flips and said, okay, you did that part. And so you got to work harder to keep the fires burning. So let's talk about that. How are we going to work hard to keep the fires burning? Again, I think a lot of the me's out there that are listening to us are saying, great, I'm in. 40% higher sexual satisfaction. Just tell me, what the hell is emotional intimacy? And we're going to do that. But first, we're going to tell you that we are supported by Shout Sobriety. Avid listeners hear us every week promote our Echoes of Recovery program for the loved ones of alcoholics. I'm going to let our listeners in on a little inside information. I'm talking federal government level insider trading. Over 80% of the self-help resources in America are purchased by women. Even when a book about alcoholism and recovery, for example,
like our book, Sober Evolution, Evolve into Sobriety and Recover Your Alcoholic Marriage.
Yes, exactly.
Our lengthy title book.
Yeah, well, there's a title and then a subtitle.
Yeah, that's how all books are nowadays, especially those self-help books.
Yeah, so yes, even when a book like our Sober Evolution is purchased for a man, it's usually purchased by a woman. So since the majority of our listeners are the female partners of alcoholics, and since females most often care enough about themselves and their loved ones to actually do something about their struggles and dysfunctions, listeners usually hear us talk about our Echoes of Recovery program. But Echoes was actually our second program. The OG is our Shout Sobriety program, which has been helping high-functioning alcoholics seeking recovery for over 6 years now. Here's the deal. If you think rock bottom stories and a spiritual approach to recovery would work best for you, then Shout Sobriety is not your program. But if you want to work on more than sobriety, but recovery, growth, enlightenment with a bunch of really inquisitive people who are not afraid to explore their underlying issues that cause their addictions, as well as the threats of addiction transference, and you want to do that in a form that understands modern brain chemistry and recovery nutrition, then Shout Sobriety might be something you should check out.
Yeah, with those 4 formats for video calls that include writing prompts and doing critical analysis of resources in the recovery community, Shout Sobriety is a lot more than just not drinking alcohol. And because we lead it with our expertise in relationship recovery, Shout Sobriety provides tools for navigating partnerships.
Yeah, so if you are ready to do the work of recovery, but you don't know what that means, if you've tried the 12 steps and that's not a good fit, If you want a program that will help you grow long after your cravings for alcohol are in the rearview mirror, maybe Shout Sobriety is right for you. To check us out, please go to shoutsobriety.org. We are supported by SoberLink, the high-tech, tamper-proof, stellar quality, best-in-class breathalyzer and accountability tool. I know we haven't gotten into the details of what emotional intimacy really is yet. We're going to do that after the sponsorship break. But I have to tell you, SoberLink really reminds me of emotional intimacy. Emotional intimacy is, at the end of the day, all about building trust. And that's what SoberLink is all about too. Most people who jump on Amazon and buy a $20 breathalyzer aren't doing it to build trust. They're doing it to validate their suspicions of lying and deceit. They need a tool to shove in the face of the drinker who claims to be sober when the hairs stick up on the back of their neck. Or the drinker in sobriety wants a tool to use to prove, see, I told you I didn't drink, when a relationship ravaged by alcohol isn't getting any better in sobriety. If you're trying to perpetuate a shame, blame, and pain cycle, stick with the internet cheapie.
But if you want to create an environment where trust can begin to grow again, choose SoberLink instead. SoberLink has scheduled testing, reliable hardware and technology, 24/7 facial recognition support, color-coded reports distributed automatically to the accountability partners, and testing accuracy that is court admissible in all 50 states and Canada.
If you want to create trust in your relationship and recovery or in your co-parenting situation, choose SoberLink. To learn more about SoberLink and for a promo code for $50 off your device, please go to soberlink.com/untoxicated. Okay, Sheri, so people who report positive emotional intimacy in their relationships and recovery from alcoholism have a 40% higher rate of sexual satisfaction. I am sold on emotional intimacy. How do I get me some of that so I can get me some of that? I like that part. Did you like that?
No.
Okay. It's important to understand that the two most likely attitudes and experiences that we've encountered regarding sexual intimacy. I am what you'd call a compartmentalizer. Sexual satisfaction is a standalone thing for me, not really related to the rest of the world around me. As long as I don't experience the rejection inherent in consent, which I will briefly explain, as long as I don't experience that, I can have high sexual satisfaction. All I need is enthusiastic consent and some fun, sexy time. When I talk about the rejection inherent in consent, I'm talking about, especially back in the days when I was a drinker, and you would consent to sexual activity just to appease me and get me to go to sleep and get me out of your hair for the night. Mm-hmm. Maybe you didn't want to stay up arguing about sex, or you just didn't want the whiny, babyish attitude I would give, just whatever. You would agree reluctantly. And so this is all very, very important stuff. Some of our research has shown that in an alcoholic relationship, there is an 18 times more likely chance of intimate partner rape than in non-alcoholic relationships. 18 times, that is a huge number. That's something to be talked about at another time. But so intimate partner rape is when there really isn't consent given. And we've heard horror stories about what that looks like. But we didn't experience that. What we experienced was reluctant consent. And that reluctant consent would be just as bad as rejection for me. It just made me feel awful and worthless. And I know everyone's really worried about my feelings.
Right.
But that's what happened. And so when I say I'm a
it built resentment for me.
Yeah.
About sex, about you.
Just made the whole thing toxic for you, right?
Yes.
Yes. I thought you were going to talk more, so I got some coffee. Pardon me.
That's your job, the talking more.
Yeah, well, everybody's got to be good at something. So that the rejection inherent in reluctant consent is a real thing, and that's no good for me. But as long as I get enthusiastic consent, and then we have some fun, sexy time, then I am good to go on sexual satisfaction, and it is unrelated to the rest of the things that happen in the world
The
and during the
world could be
day.
crumbling around you.
If it kind of is.
But, well, yeah, it is kind of on fire right now. But as long as you have those things, you're ready to go.
That's right.
Yeah. Good. It must be good to be. Sometimes it must be good to be a compartmentalizer.
Yeah.
Just putting things off to the side, but
yeah,
facing them later.
Yeah.
It's hard to be the compiler. It's a big, heavy bag of crap I carry around with me.
Okay, so I'm compartmentalizer. You're a compiler. What does that mean, Sheri? What does it mean to be a compiler?
So it means if there had been any sort of disruption to the force throughout the day, that sex is not really on my radar. Not like it is most of the time, or not compared to you, but if, say, in the evening there was an uncomfortable situation with maybe a curfew, or a situation with the kids that we had to argue with them about.
Yeah, like kids curfew. You don't have a curfew.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry, kids
Just
curfew.
Want to make sure.
Yeah. Well, maybe you have a curfew. I don't know.
I'd go to bed at 8 p.m. every night if I could.
Please send me to my room. Something of that nature. If there's an argument about the squabbling between them, and we have to get involved because it's getting annoying and very confrontational and very out of hand. Those are things that upset me.
Yeah.
And so then when we go to bed, even if it's 2 or 3 hours later, I have a really hard time flipping the switch from being in a situation, and it's not always a parental thing, but being in a situation where my emotions aren't still flowing through my veins about an uncomfortable or sad situation when we go to bed.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to shake that
and
get out of that, and then switch into, as you would like to say, some fun, sexy time.
Yeah, and as a master class, like ninja level superpower compiler, I mean, you are top drawer. It's more than just 2 or 3 hours. Maybe if it was a bad interaction with the kids, 2 or 3 hours isn't enough for you to flip that switch off.
Mm-hmm.
But being a compiler means it, the negativity can carry back way further than a couple hours. If one of the things we like to talk about so much is our home finances. If you were to tell me about a dentist appointment that's going to lead to $5,000 worth of orthodontics in the morning on a Tuesday, and I flip out and don't handle that well, and even though it's not your fault, I rant and rave, not necessarily at you, but at the situation, and just make a big deal about it, and you feel guilty about it, even though you haven't done anything to cause the need for orthodontics. Am I saying that right? Yeah.
Orthodontia.
Yeah. Great. Even though it's not your fault, because I rant and rave about it, and I do so thinking you and I are on the same page. It's both of our money. We should both be mad about this, even though there's really nobody to be mad at. If I do that on a Tuesday morning, that can still be affecting you on Thursday evening. I mean, that's what I mean when I say the difference between being a compartmentalizer and a compiler is huge, and understanding that foreplay is perpetual, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be emotionally stable all the time because you can carry something over for a long time. And that's not meant as a negative. If you were the only person who did that, then maybe we'd say, Sheri, why don't you go work on that with a therapist? But we've literally met hundreds and hundreds of people who do that. So that's a thing.
Yeah.
It's not a dysfunction.
And I think it's more prominent in relationships where there has been an addiction of some sort and trauma that goes along with that. Because I think for healthy couples, it might be something that happened on Tuesday, but by Thursday, most people are kind of over it, or they can shake it. And but I think there is something that makes partners of addicts a little more prone to kind of have a tendency to compile things. I feel like I'm working on getting better at that. And I'm sure that that's just my own personal growth and detachment from some situations.
Yeah.
Like if it's the health of my mom who lives in a different state, you know. And if I find out that something is going on, you know, it's, you know, I can rationalize and understand that it's, you know, a natural life situation that's happening there, and I can't control it.
Right.
So I think that I'm getting a little better with the compiling.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But if it's a lot of shit in one day,
yeah,
and I can't shake a lot of shit in one day.
Yeah.
So don't ask for sex.
Oh,
after a bad day.
I've gotten to the point where I can. I don't compile myself, but I can tally your compilation. I can go like, yep. That's overflowing. That's spilling out onto the floor. That is no bueno.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a linear progression that it's important for us to understand for the compilers of the world. Again, as compartmentalizers, there's no progression. There's sexy time and there's the rest of the time. And those two don't have a lot to do with each other. I mean, the way that they do have a lot to do with each other is that I'm always, to some degree, thinking about sex or wondering about sex or interested in sex. So it's not like there's a switch that has to be flipped. It's just there's an opportunity that presents itself, and I'm like, oh, here we go. For compilers, there's this linear progression that's important for me, my side of the fence, to understand as well. Emotional safety and resentment processing, those are the two foundational pieces that we've come to really, really understand. Emotional safety is creating an environment, especially in the home, that is consistently even keel, calm, and easily navigable without nervous system activation. So, the example of the orthodontics quote is one, but there's more. There are things that I can do in the home that create an emotionally unsafe environment that don't. It's not just about me yelling at you and calling you names and being mad at you. I can be, as we've shared in the past, I can be mad at the TV because of what's going on with the political dysfunction that we're all enduring right now. I can stand there and scream at the television set, and that just raises the level of anxiety in the house. Mm-hmm. I can be, one of our kids, when he watches sports, he's really into blaming the refs for the outcome of every game. There must be no qualified refs on the planet in any sport. And so he can scream and yell at the TV, not because his team is losing, but because it's the ref's fault. Mm-hmm. And that would be another example of, now he's a teenager, so he has less power in the house, to be honest, to create a level of anxiety that everyone else has to swim through and to make an emotionally unsafe environment. But if I was to do that, that would be bad.
Yeah.
And so
yeah, but knowing that is going on and that both of us are getting elevated mm-hmm. because of the traumas of the past, it does rise that level, whether he's, an 18 year old kid doing that. It's still like could be triggering, or I know you and I both sometimes like get annoyed by it. So it's an emotional has an emotional impact on us.
It does. Mm-hmm. I just think if it were me, it would be 10x what it is when he does it.
Yeah.
And so,
well, I just didn't want to discount that I think.
You're right.
That there can be, even though we're on the same side of we need better, a better outcome for him or a better way to handle this situation. It's still like for an compiler, it still is, and a person who's had triggers from that, it still hits.
I think back to when we were younger, when we were first together, and I was so into, we went to Indiana University, I was so into Indiana University basketball that I actually thought that I had superstitions to the degree that I thought there were things that I could do to control the outcome of the games. I was a complete, is that a psychopath or sociopath? I don't know what that is. But I actually believed that it mattered. And you had to live in that environment. That had to be, did you stress about whether they were going to win or lose because you were worried about me going crazy when they would lose?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, what a terrible thing to put you through.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time, like when we were in college and before we lived together, I didn't even want to see you. Yeah. We made sure that I wasn't even around you for games. But it was much harder when we lived together and when we moved to an area where we had lots of people in the drivable area to. And we would
Because
go
games
to
would be a social thing.
games would be a social thing with
Ugh.
a lot of our Indiana alum, and then if they lost, holy shit.
Yeah, that would be an awful thing for me to. And I look back on that as, I mean, just the ultimate immaturity to put you through that. But it was all about me. I wasn't thinking about you at all. That'll surprise nobody. So yeah, so emotional safety, creating that environment, just can't emphasize enough how important that is. I mean, I think there are a lot of us former drinkers who don't even realize that our partner has one foot out the door.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize the degree to which you didn't like me and how close you were to being done with me until I did. And, um, the very first thing you can do to stop the bleeding in a relationship like that is create emotional safety. Stop ranting about things. Stop. Um, and I think a great way to think about it is this thing I'm doing raising the anxiety level of the people around me? If you just think in those terms, it'll help you to stop doing things that are emotionally unsafe. Mm-hmm. Whether they're directed at that person or not really doesn't matter a ton.
Also, I think adding to that, one thing you can do is to analyze this is a big thing or a little thing. Because I felt
Yes.
like your level of attention and frustration would happen whether it was a big thing or a little thing.
Yeah. Well, that's another whole podcast topic. I've learned that I am going to be stressed about things. And this is something I'm doing a lot of work on.
Yeah.
Is not being stressed about things that are outside my control. But if I've got a big thing to be stressed about, then it feels very normal and natural to be stressed. But if I don't have a big thing to be stressed about, I'll pick a small thing and stress about it just as much as I would a big thing.
You obsess, overdo?
Yeah, well, that's when I see myself doing over minor things, that's actually super helpful because I'm like, oh my God, this isn't related to the thing. This is a me problem. Holy shit. I got to work on me. So, yeah. And I'm working on it. That's getting better.
You are, and you're doing much better.
So emotional safety is one of the foundations. Resentment processing is the other. We've talked a lot about that. We're not going to go into great detail on resentment processing, but basically the short version is trauma doesn't go away. Trauma doesn't go away over the span of an entire lifetime. It doesn't just go away on its own, even if it's something from a long time ago. So you can be sober for 20 years, and if you've traumatized your partner and that's never been dealt with, she's still carrying that around. And so you have to address the trauma. What you and I recommend is what we call resentment processing, where we go through instances of the past that are really hard for you. For us, it's not necessarily about an apology. It's more about acknowledgement and validation. Yeah, Sheri, that sounds hard. I was blackout drunk for that. I didn't realize what that was doing to you, and I want to acknowledge that. And I do often apologize and just recognize how hard that was for you. And so if you're one of these former drinkers who's like, that was in the past, we're moving forward, look at me now, I'm sober, I'm great, I'm awesome, you are missing an opportunity to improve your relationship if you reject the idea of resentment processing. You have to deal with the trauma, or that person will resent you for the rest of your life, and boy, doesn't that make for a fun relationship. So those are the foundations: emotional safety, resentment processing. On top of that, we can build emotional intimacy and non-sexual physical intimacy. That's the non-sexual physical intimacy is the stuff I talked about earlier. The sticking to your shoulders, your back, when I touch you and we're not in the heat of the moment. You and I will often, even in bed, we will spend a lot of time with just touching before, the traditional foreplay, but it's not erotic zones. It's you like to have your ear rubbed, for instance, your ear tickled, as you like to say.
Yeah.
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 So
it's relaxing.
Yeah, stuff that's relaxing. That's a great way to look at it. Mm-hmm. So that non-sexual physical touch is super, super important,
or just like throughout the day, like
yeah,
a kiss and a hug. doesn't mean it's, afternoon delight. Get that out of your brains,
Yeah,
folks.
love that. So a commitment to that is really important because, as you said earlier, if I go past you and I rub your back, there's a feeling of safety, there's a feeling of connection that's important for a compiler, especially to feel like we're staying connected throughout the day. And so that's really, really helpful. If I've been gone all day and I come home from work and I throw my stuff down and I immediately turn on the TV to rant about politics without making any sort of effort to connect with you, um, that's not going to lead to, for a compiler, that's not going to lead to good feelings later. Fair? Okay, so non-sexual physical intimacy, super important. And then emotional intimacy, the real key to what we're talking about today. Um, let's talk about some specific things we can do with emotional intimacy. Uh, eye contact and undivided attention when you want to talk about something. So put the device down, close the computer, turn the TV off, look you in the face, and listen to the thing that you want to say, as opposed to multitasking, which isn't really a thing. Lots of research on that. Humans can't multitask. Some people are better at switching between things than back and forth, back and forth, back and forth than other people are. But there's really no such thing as multitasking. So a way to show emotional intimacy is to give undivided attention when there's stuff that needs attention. And one thing that you're really good about is you'll check in and say, "Hey, is this a good time to talk about this?" And sometimes I'm like flustered and confused and working on something I don't understand. And I'm like, no, I can't stop right now because I'm in the middle of it and I don't get it and I need to keep going. And, other times I can stop and pause in the middle of something. Sometimes it's really welcomed, but you're really good about asking. But that undivided attention is really important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Listening without fixing is another form of emotional intimacy. I used to, especially with kid stuff, when you'd say, one of our kids isn't listening to me, I'd say, well, it's because you give them too many goddamn choices. Don't give them options, just tell them what to do. And if they don't do, yell at them. That'll fix everything. That was not helpful.
Right.
Especially when we're trying to keep a foundation of emotional safety. So sometimes you just want someone to listen to you. And I need that too.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I'll have big problems and I'll tell you, and I know you're trying so hard. And sometimes you'll say, well, have you tried this? Have you done that? I don't want that right now. I just want you to listen to what I have to say. And let me get it out of my brain and move on. So definitely goes both ways.
Yeah.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Reading the room. Your partner can't be your mother and your lover. That's another Esther Perelism. Find other outlets for emotional processing. This is a huge problem societally, way beyond alcoholism for the males in the population. We don't have outlets for our emotions. We go to work and we tease each other all day. If we hang out with our friends, if we go to a ball game, if we, whatever, the kids are having an event on the weekend, we're standing around with all the other dads, we just tease each other or small talk. There's no emotional connection there whatsoever. Women are much better at finding emotional connection outside of their primary relationship than men are. That is a huge problem, huge societal problem. So we have to read the room. We have to understand that, yes, it's okay for me to come home from work and complain a little bit about something that happened, but I can't do it for 3 hours. That's just a drag on the relationship. I have to look capable. And look, I went to work. I accomplished some things. A few things didn't go well, and I'm going to tell you about them. But for the most part, I persevered. Aren't you happy to see me persevering?
And I feel like that is a level of disrespect in the relationship that when you feel like the only person you have to dump on about others or things outside of the relationship is your partner, and like you said, 3 hours, read the room, whatever, like
right,
no one has that kind of time, just impromptuitively.
Yeah.
Is that a word?
Yeah, we're all freaking busy, everybody. And so here, I got 3 hours to unload on you. Can you sit down and give me eye contact and put your device away and stop, cooking dinner or getting ready for tomorrow or whatever? Not gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
Really good point. Yeah, so read that room. And then have an authentic interest in your partner's interests. Don't agree to go shopping and they complain all the time. This is something I used to be terrible about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, okay, fine, I'll do your thing, and then bitch about it the whole time. It would have been a
Or make
thousand times
fun or
better.
mock it.
That's right. It would have been 1,000 times better if I just didn't go.
Yeah.
Fair?
Fair.
So, like, cats are a good example. Everyone knows your passion for cats. You just stood up so people, anyone who's watching the video can read your Save All the Cats shirt. And then, you know, so I know that's important to you. And then if I go do something cat related and then bitch about it, it would have been better if I wasn't there.
Yeah.
So if you're going to show an interest,
Because you
go
just
all
start
in.
drag on someone else's good time and you're yucking someone else's yum.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Did you make that up?
No, I've heard it. It's kind of an
Yucking
old little,
someone else's yum. That's
it's
good.
like kind of an old thing. But I think that, and that goes both ways, right? Like if, I think in, like for an example, in early sobriety, perhaps your alcoholic wants to go to a sporting event where typically in the past there's been alcoholism and they're maybe worried about being around it, and maybe you're a little extra sensitive as the partner of them going, and so you agree to go and you're kind of both being each other's support a little bit and you've agreed to that and it's not meant to be glommy, but then you go and as the partner, you know, and there's like maybe some behaviors that are not attractive to you when you go and you make fun of that, but the sporting event and the event goes well for your partner, but you're kind of dismissing that. Like that's how I feel like I used to be with the Indianapolis 500.
Well,
like and back in your drinking days, and yes, you overdid it, and I'm sure that that's why that I kind of got mad. But there were also things about it that wasn't about the alcohol that I made fun of, or I made you probably feel like sorry that you took me because I wasn't having a good time, you know, because it wasn't necessarily my thing, but I should have been more respectful and appreciated that it was something you really enjoyed.
Well, as our relationship has improved, you've gotten really good at that. They're really the only live sports we attend these days are college soccer.
Mm-hmm.
And I go to more of that than you do, but sometimes you'll come along. And I have noticed you'll ask questions, you know, why are they doing that? Who's that? What's that guy doing?
That guy looks like Augustus Scoop.
Well, one of my favorite pictures of you, it was a college soccer game and we were trying to get out of there a few minutes early, but I think it was probably just a 1-goal game. So we were trying to leave but not leave, so we walked down this tunnel where you could still see the field, but something was blocking, and we wanted to watch the last minute of the game. And I have a picture of you. You climbed a chain link fence so you could get over the advertising banner and see the end of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant a lot to me. I'm like, wow, you know, if she hadn't attended this game at all, she would not have looked up the score on the internet. She doesn't give any shits at all.
Yeah.
But she's here and she's invested, so now she wants to see the ending. And I love that picture of you.
Right, and showing enthusiasm, like you said, about someone else's, you know, form of entertainment. And yeah, if I didn't go, I wouldn't have cared. But since I'm there, I'm going to be invested. I'm going to be involved. I'm going to show interest in that.
So show an authentic interest in your partner's interests or don't participate at all. Whatever you do, don't go and then bitch about it. That is awful. So it's important that I think we all look at sexual intimacy, sexual satisfaction, as was measured in this survey that we're basing this on, as an outcome, not a goal. We can't say, how do I get more sexual satisfaction? We have to say, I'm going to commit to these 4 things: emotional safety and resentment processing. And on top of that, I'm going to commit to emotional intimacy and non-sexual physical intimacy. And I'm going to go all in. And if you do that, the outcome is likely over time, this stuff all takes time, to be increased sexual satisfaction. But make that an outcome as opposed to a goal. So I want to do something a little different as we close up shop here today, Sheri. We do a lot of writing in our groups. And we always encourage our listeners to look into our groups and consider joining our groups. I think there's a ton of benefit. Anyone who's listened to over an hour of this conversation could get a lot from joining our groups. But that doesn't mean everyone is going to. Obviously not. So one of the things that we do a lot in our groups is write to specific prompts. And there are two real benefits to writing to prompts, and they're standalone benefits. The first one is when you write to a prompt, you write about your toxic stuff. It gets it out of your head to live someplace else. I'll never forget, you and I are close with someone whose husband committed suicide. He was an alcoholic, he was drunk at the time, and she was the person who found him. And it was incredibly traumatic. The end of the relationship, the last couple of years of the relationship, the suicide event itself, all of that, just, I mean, unspeakable trauma in her head. And it took her a while, but maybe, I don't remember exactly, but maybe a year after it happened, she started writing about it, and she wrote a lot. It was, she didn't sit down for 15 minutes and then she was done. But she wrote it all down, and the relief that she found from that is incredible because her brain no longer felt responsible for holding that memory because she was the one and only person who witnessed finding him. And her brain no longer felt responsible for holding that. It was written down somewhere. If she ever needed to, she could go back and access it. That is huge. That is a well documented research finding that when we write stuff down, it releases it from our brain. And so, writing to a prompt in and of itself, even if you never share it with anybody, even if you put it in a journal, you lock it away and never look at it again, just having it written down releases it from your head. It's huge. And then the second standalone part of writing to a prompt is the stuff that we do in our groups, which is reading it out loud in a safe audience, like Shout Sobriety or like Echoes of Recovery. That does a lot for you too, because when you receive empathy from people who really get it, from people who relate to your story, having people relate to your traumatic, toxic, awful story that you thought you were the only person that had ever experienced, that is huge for the healing process. Mm-hmm. And so that's something we do within the group that I'm not necessarily suggesting that listeners who don't join can do on their own. I mean, maybe you can find a way. But the first part you can definitely do on your own. Get it out of your head, get it written down. So give part one a try. We're going to read a prompt, and we're going to suggest that you write to the prompt and put it in a journal somewhere and see how that feels. So, related to today's discussion, the writing prompt is, what are some tangible, specific ways you create emotional intimacy in your relationship? If you need to work in this area, please write about at least one thing you are going to do to create emotional intimacy. So, listeners, we hope you'll, write to that prompt and see how that feels. Thank you so much for having this discussion with me today, Sheri.
So, if this discussion was helpful to you, please remember that the Untoxicated Podcast is brought to you by the 501c3 nonprofit organization Stigma. Stigma does not take government money. This work is only possible through the fully tax-deductible donations of listeners like you. Please consider setting up a reoccurring monthly donation for just $10 to keep this podcast thriving. Please go to supportuntoxicated.org to show your support.
And thank you for listening to the Untoxicated Podcast.